Dr. Leslie Gayle Atkinson Swaby. How are you? You're looking wonderful. I shouldn't ask that question. Please.
Greetings.
Greetings, my sister. Greetings.
Actually, Marcus. Greetings.
Marcus, look at that beautiful smile.
Oh,
My gosh.
Woo! Morning.
I just gave out your secret. I told everybody your name.
Oh, Boyanani?
Boyanani. You hear what you said, stylish? Oh my gosh. Miss Laura, come.
I'm very proud of my Taino name.
I know. So please, that connection where we always keep talking about. Share with us.
Well, I would like really to us to have a conversation, and I'm sure with you and Marcus, it will be an interesting conversation.
Marcus, you hear?
We
should tell Marcus to don't.
Huh?
We should
tell Marcus Maroon and Taino too, you know.
Is that true, Marcus?
We have claimed him. We have claimed him. But first, I wanted to start with, who are the Tainos? There are a lot of misconceptions out there. We've been taught a lot of things in the past. Even my own personal journey in terms of who they were and their name. There's been a lot of confusion referring to them as Arawak. I'm probably dating myself here. But who are the Tainos? We know them as the first people of the Caribbean, the indigenous. I don't like to use terms like native. I find it a bit offensive, but maybe I'm a little too touchy on the issue. And people tend to think that the Tainos just came like that and just inhabited the Caribbean. No, they are a product of various ancestors who came to the region in different waves of migration from Central and South America. And in the process, they created this group of people that Columbus and the Spaniards met. So the term Taino is really those associated with the contact people that the Spanish encountered. And then, of course, sadly, the heavy demise, as is not uncommon with other indigenous groups of the Americas, with the cultural contact. But they are descendants of what we know as the Estonian and the Mayacan, specifically in Jamaica. And but we tend to only study everything as to make that correction. We were taught that they primarily settled along the coast, which is true. It depending on where their villages were distributed. Villages known as Yukayekes. They also settled in the interior valleys, into the limestone plateaus, and they had a wide distribution across the island. Are you hearing me? I'm hearing an echo. Are you hearing me? Carol?
We're hearing you very clearly, but we're not sure. We're also hearing some things in the background, but I'm sure our technical will be sorting that out as quickly as possible.
Right.
But we're hearing very, very clearly.
Madam President, may I interject there?
Yes,
Madam
sir.
MC. If she have her system on, she can turn it down, like her computer.
Okay. So you could adjust the volume on your computer, Leslie Gayle. Adjust it down a little bit. It probably is at maximum.
It's a little.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That is actually a little clearer, isn't it, Mark Franco?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dr. Leslie Gayle Atkinson.
No, man, Leslie Gayle is
Swaby.
fine. Leslie Gayle is fine. Swaby is not my name at all, you know. Swaby is the husband's name. But one of the sad things about Taino is that, we tend to be very preoccupied about the horrors of African slavery, but in our region, the Africans were not the only ones. And the first peoples that were enslaved, sadly, were, the Taino. And we all have heard and have been taught about the horrors, that they endured, and this led to, of course, a substantial reduction in their population. And these enslavement systems are like the repartmental and the communal system. Everything is all about economics. I don't know how many of you know that Jamaica, at the time of the Spanish occupation, was the property of Columbus, the Columbus family. So even our initial Spanish colonization had to do with the Columbus family. Diego Columbus, his son, he was instrumental in the establishment of Jamaica's first European capital, which is Seville la Nueva. Some people debate whether it was really Seville or Seville. Either name, it was still the first Spanish capital, established between 1509 and 1510. And this establishment of this capital is where we see the earliest importation of enslaved Africans, as early as 1513. Some of them were said to be imported as domestic enslaved, others as fields to work, enslaved to work in their ranches, hatos, haciendas, and so forth. Right, so that is where we see, and of course, Professor Shepherd, she's not a big fan of Las Cascas, because Las Cascas believed that that Africans were suitable for hard labor, and that they were a suitable supplement for the demise or the shortage of labor because of the depopulation of the indigenous Americans. And he supported the introduction of the African slave trade. And even though they only started domestically with domestic slaves originally, it led to the influx of hundreds of African slaves to our shores. I mean, I'm happy for it because I would have millennium without it. So
it certainly is a very interesting space to dwell, isn't it? Because there's a way we really are horrified by the horrors, but in a way we are still glad, and we spoke about this earlier, Marcus, that we're here. But you know what I always say? I say, probably I should have spoken to God and tell him to find another way to bring me here. But then, I mean, yes, it's a curious place to be in. Let me leave it at that, Leslie Gayle.
Yes.
Curious place.
Yes. Right. So we did the introduction of who the Taino is, and then how the first Africans got here. The next issue is, what is maroonage? Who is a maroon? Is being maroon only limited to racial identity? Because we in Jamaica we tend to think that maroons are enslaved African slaves.
That's again, me know you're the jealous from long time,
Huh?
Me know you're the jealous from long time, because you're a Taino, I'm African. Me say me maroon. You're not maroon. Go away. Prove it.
No, I can prove it. The woman who I come from, she comes from a woman of maroon heritage. And there's, while with many not sure, you can't deny where your mother come from.
Oh, exactly. You see that, and that's again Kwaos people. They trace their people matrilineally. You see everything connected. Yes, but it's a point that many of us lose, Leslie Gayle, that there were maroons here before the Africans came.
Right, and because I know this is the accepted definition of, runaways or, wild horse. I mean, I find that so dehumanizing, but I view maroons as brave people who decided that they did not want to be enslaved, and they took to task and did what they had to do to gain their freedom, and they fought to ensure that they remain free, not just for themselves, but their successors and generations. And this concept of lineage to me is not limited to African maroons, right? Which is very popular for us here in Jamaica. But maroonage is a concept and a livelihood that has been reflected in different parts of the Americas. You know, in Latin America, Venezuela, Mexico, in Cuba, you know, Hispaniola, even Puerto Rico. So maroonage is an important way of life, and it is not limited to race or ethnicity. And that is my
so to our favorite conversation, Dr. Atkinson Swaby, did these two people get together?
Well, I think that I think the only reason that we have, all right, in cultural anthropology, we like to look at cultural retentions, cultural residues, and cultural reminiscence. And the strongest cultural legacies we are seeing as retentions. And the fact that we still have retention in Jamaica still, it means that there's a group that succeeds in transmitting information from one generation to the next. And as you are aware, as a studier of indigenous cultures, you know how important, you know, oral history
indeed
people to us as Africans, right? And also people of indigenous Americans. We don't write journal and diary and reflective notes, and you know that is not our way. Always through song, it is through folklore, it is through stories.
String of stories, indeed.
Some of these legacies and traditions. You know, when I think about even my own family's experience, I mean, my two grandfathers are from it, and you know, as a child growing up, my great grandmother, I mean, I am lucky. I knew all my great grandparents on my maternal side.
Wow, you're not lucky, you're blessed.
Yes,
that's greater than blessed. Look.
And my great grandmother, Miss Aina from Slipe, she used to make bami from scratch, right? And I mean, I even though she died over 30 years ago, I can still smell her bami. And it is not her bami it's not the commercial bami that we see in the supermarket, you know, that looks nice and dainty, round and thick. No, it's more like a bread that you can just break and eat easily. And when I think about how she did baskets straight, you know, the same shrimp pots and fish pots that our fishermen use. A lot of these are traditional and indigenous technologies that are still carrying on today. But somebody clearly taught her this. I am sad that I, at the time, was too busy eating the bami. I'm not.
I didn't learn to make it.
Right, and they even had factories, you know, Southwest especially Southwest Jamaica. You know, there were a lot of outer buildings and small plots that used thatch. So there are definitely some cultural legacies, but it's not just cultural; it's also biological. All right. So just like there is evidence that the Tainos and Hispanic, I don't like to use intermarry because marry sound like there's
intermixed. Does that help?
Some sort of consensus.
Mixed and mingled.
Right, and created mezzitos populations.
Then they jam together.
All right.
Because of Jamaican language. Yeah, man, Marcos. That's how we go on.
We do believe that there was some union between African and Taino populations. And how we know this is because of the evidence in DNA. And even in countries like Jamaica, in places like Puerto Rico, 2% of the population have native or indigenous American or Taino DNA. In Cuba, especially certain sections of the island, you know, those that were Taino areas, they have evidence in their current population of people with that DNA heritage still. And although, you know, we haven't done a large scale project, we know smaller ones, people who do personal DNA genographic testing. It's called Genographic, and it was a big project by National Geographic, started around 2005 to basically trace human migration through DNA, and that project, they're famous for their Geno 2.0 kit.
Yes.
And it spurred a lot of others like Ancestry, like 23andMe, where you pay $99 and you use your saliva and send it back, and they give you a profile.
Some of them could actually track you down to the village you're from, they say. Yes.
Right. So depending how detailed they are,
yes.
Some just give you general descriptions like sub-Saharan Africa, which is Africa is so big that saying that you come from sub-Saharan Africa just means that you're just below North Africa. Some say European, which doesn't really mean much because it could Europe.
I mean, really,
so much ethnic diversity.
They just want to know where you are in the stratosphere.
Right, but also even Jamaicans have done tests, and it has been reflected that some of them have indigenous American in their DNA profile, and this composition can range anywhere from 2% to 8% or more. I have heard of somebody having 10%, but I have not personally talked to that person. But most of the people that I have dialogued with who have done the test, the maximum has been 8%. And I find that pretty remarkable for people.
That's right.
And for people who they said, were dead 100 years after, Spanish contact.
Leslie Gayle, I'm going to beg you a little pardon here, because there are two people, Franco, there are two people I'd like you to open their mics, Stephanie and Dr. Isis, who want to make a couple comments.